Beyond the Canvas, the podcast where we peel back the layers of creativity and explore the vibrant minds behind the art. It's more than just a glimpse at their art. It's a deep dive into the heart of what makes them tick.
Okay, we're recording now. Okay, so I'm here with, I'm going to pronounce it wrong again, Davey Beyer.
Yep.
Yes. And I really stink at introducing people, so please, by all means, introduce yourself, and we'll get started.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Davey Beyer. I'm 26, live in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and I am an artist and an art teacher, and I run a theater where I'm the artistic director there. So I do a lot of fun theater and art adjacent stuff as well.
Is that theater like adjunct to the school, or is that independent to the school?
No, it's Crescent Lake Playhouse, so it's a community theater out in Crescent.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a cool little place. It's an old Civil War barn that they converted into a theater. We're actually on our 51st season, and I just took over 2 years ago. So, yeah, it's a cool place. I love the job.
So that's flippin' wild. Everything I learn about you just makes me stand in more and more awe.
Oh, shucks.
And not just because you're so tall, like 12'6" or something, but the thing I want to get out of the way right away, because it floored me when I saw this, is you make puppets.
I do.
And just be clear, when I know you as a kind of a wet and dry medium, two-dimensional artist. These are anything but two-dimensional. I would love to hear how in the world you started that.
Oh, absolutely. Well, so yes, I was never a three-dimensional kind of guy. I've always been more of a painter and a drawer. But I was directing a play at high school that I used to work at. And it was a musical. It was called Percy Jackson the Musical. Are you familiar with the Percy Jackson series?
I am, and that just sounds magnificent.
Oh, it's so good. It's a stupid musical, but I love it. It's so fun.
Yeah, as it should be.
Absolutely, yeah. But there's all of these monsters in it, of course, Greek mythology creatures, and I kept watching all these versions on YouTube, and it was just like Halloween masks, and I was like, I can't do that. Like, I need to make something bigger. And so I started fiddling around with cardboard and just making these giant painted cardboard puppets. And I just like absolutely fell in love with puppetry. And a couple people went and saw the show and liked them. So they started asking me to make puppets for their productions.
That's wild.
Yeah. So now I'm the resident puppet designer and maker at the Mishler Theater in Altoona. And I do some freelance puppetry for different like high school theaters and community theaters in the area. And all of them are made out of cardboard and hot glue and paint. And I love them. They're tons of fun. And just getting like a mechanism to work is my favorite thing in the world. I'm telling you, I've never touched three-dimensional stuff before that. But this just like ignited something in me. And yeah, I make puppets all the time now, and it's a blast.
It's wild. We'll try to get some, if you're okay with it, sharing some of the videos or pictures you have
Totally.
when this goes up, because I am not being hyperbolic. When I first saw the one you did, I can't remember what it was. It was like a bird, maybe a giraffe.
Oh, the giraffe, yeah.
The giraffe. It reminded me of the Lion King like stage production.
That makes my heart so happy.
Holy cow. It's just, being adjacent to the art world for the last 4 years in our area and like getting to know the artists. This is going to sound really rude, but it just always floors me when I realize how talented y'all are and how much you do. It's kind of like when my students are like, you wrote books? I'm like, yeah. It's literally what I do. And then I hear about these things that you do, and I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, this dude's legit. And it's so insulting. I'm so sorry.
No, it's not. And it's funny because my kindergartners do the same thing. They'll be like, "Wait, you're an artist?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm your art teacher. What are you talking about?" Like,
Yeah.
but
How,
it is funny.
so how did you get into art and, like your origin story?
Yeah, so it's not a sweet story looking back. I think it was more born out of spite. Um, but I I my family is very artistic. We're all singers and artists and all do theater. And my brother was 10 years older than me and was just a fantastic artist. He had this like this crazy cool cartoony style that was just like you couldn't find it anywhere else. He just had something. And he was 18 and I was 8 and I was like, I am going to be a better drawer than him.
Hmm,
And so
18 and you were 8.
yeah, he was so much better than me. But I started drawing all the time. I started just doodling monsters constantly. That was my gateway, and I just started making art all the time. And when I hit high school, I really started to just fall in love with the process of making art. And um, I just have I don't think there's a day where I don't paint something because it chills me out and it just makes me so happy. And I love it. So it started out as spite, but it turned into a genuine love
That's
for
really cool.
creating.
And you do have insane output.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Do you have a favorite medium?
Yes, I love watercolor. That is my favorite, and I like it because of how not precious it is.
Hmm.
Um, because you go to college for art, and it is all oil paints and squirrel hair brushes and $80 canvases, and you just feel like everything you do has to be perfect. And I feel like my art really suffered because of it. Like I was like, this has to be important work that is perfect and incredible. And I really lost a lot of my style in the fact that I thought my art needed to be these classical oil paintings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I went and started teaching in Maryland. I was teaching in Maryland for a year, and I was at the school with very small budget, and I all they had was watercolor stuff there, and I barely touched the stuff. So I was like, I got to learn watercolor if I'm going to teach these kids. And I fell in love with the fact that you can just mess up in watercolor and throw it away and it's 10 cents down the drain. Like who cares? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what really appeals to me is that I can do a silly, goofy little watercolor painting and I can charge $50 for it and it's just done and I don't have to worry about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think it lets my creativity soar a little bit more.
Can you talk about that a little bit, like your creative process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay. So I was thinking about this today, and I always say that my art is every one of my paintings feels like a self portrait of me at that moment. And if you know my art, it is weird. Like it's usually like an animal with a fruit bowl hat in the desert where they shouldn't be in the desert. You know what I mean?
Flippin'
Uh,
delightful.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, so that I find them to be self portraits, and I kind of consider myself sort of a collage artist in that way, in that I will just kind of paint whatever I find really, really interesting that day. So if it's a walrus, I'll start with a walrus and then I'll be like, man, I saw a Western movie last night and how funny would it be to have a walrus in a cowboy hat? And then what if that walrus was in a city? And so we end up with this sort of mismatched collage of different things. And I just kind of add until it feels right and it feels like me at that moment, and that's all there is. That's all I wrote. All she wrote.
I love that. I absolutely love how unapologetic that is and just doing it because you like it.
Yeah,
That's, yeah.
yeah, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but in college, I felt like everything needed to be important and heady and conceptual, and all of your professors are like, you need to make important work that's political and all this stuff. And I look back at that time, all of my art from my college years, and I don't resonate with it at all because it just feels so forced. And
Yeah.
my own voice was not being heard. I was trying to be this, heavy artist, and I'm just not a heavy artist. I'm a silly artist. I like making silly stuff that makes me laugh, and um, maybe I can find some beauty in it. But yeah.
You know, I absolutely see the silliness. I really do. Um, and I may be talking out of turn, but a lot of your art, like I'm thinking of the flamingo and especially the rabbit, the ones that are up at Fox Clark right now,
Yeah.
and even that beautiful design you did with the two birds to match your couch. Um, there's silliness, but there's a lot of melancholy too. Does that sound fair, or am
I
I barking
I
up the wrong tree?
No, I think that is fair. I had a professor who told me that all of my artwork made him incredibly sad. Um, in that all of um, the things that I would draw, the silly creatures
Hmm.
always seemed out of place,
Yeah.
and they kind of said that it was sort of like a scarecrow in the wrong field, and I loved that, and I think that
Hmm.
actually pushed me once I got out of college to go in that route a little bit more. I really liked that idea, and I agreed with it. So,
Do
yeah.
you think college art education was useful, or do you think it would have been better maybe if you had just, I don't know, maybe done Proco.com or, one of the online things?
I think it was very beneficial for me, even though I don't resonate with the art as much. Technically speaking, I learned so much from my professors. They were amazing, and they taught me so many different techniques and different ways, and challenged me to do different things. Um, and also the competition in college.
Mm,
Um, I was always pretty middle of the pack in college because there were just people who were technically miles above me. Um, so that definitely encouraged me to make art and to work on my craft, which I think now allows me, like, my silly ideas before weren't compositionally sound, or maybe I didn't quite know how to do colors as well. So college really helped me in that aspect.
that's cool. Yeah, I was just thinking about composition. You do something that a lot of artists won't do, and that's you often put your in your big paintings, not the like the doodles, but in the big paintings, the main feature is almost always right in the center.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that Ivan would be abhorred with,
And
but it
he did. He
works.
roasted me on it many times.
But it's just and it works so well. Yes, I'm a gusher, just heads up.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad it works, because sometimes I'm like, should I be getting more adventurous with this? But um usually it just feels right. Like, maybe it's the theater uh person in me, but when I paint something, like, it's kind of like that thing is taking center stage. It's right in the center. This is what you should be looking at right
Yeah,
now.
that is fascinating to think about. That's really neat.
Thank
That
you.
was a very
Well,
profound statement on my part. Very neat.
well, I am constantly in theater mode. Like, my job is at Crescent Lake Playhouse is it's constant. It's every day I'm thinking about. So I think my head's pretty permanently in theater, and art is sort of my escape. But it kind of
Yeah.
it works its way in.
So do you typically paint alla prima, or do you have like longer projects?
Um, Pretty much alla prima. Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I do some, like, glazing. Um, but that's, I have 8 hours a day where I'm teaching kids, and
Yeah.
so a lot of my stuff is just, I start that day and I'm kind of finished either the end of that day or the next day. So yeah, not usually a long project kind of guy. I get impatient.
So okay, you teach. I hope I get this right. K through 6.
K through 6 art. Yep.
Okay, because I'm really interested in your opinion or expertise, like your expert opinion on what is the role of art in early childhood education?
Oh, well, I think that it is absolutely vital. Arts, whether it's art, music, you know, library, all of those special classes in elementary school are so important. And you know, one thing that I always say if I'm interviewing for a job, or if I'm just trying to justify my program, is that art for art's sake is important enough. And
Yeah.
you know, you like kids need to be creative. They want to be creative. That is so important. However, art is also so good for developing other skills, and the main one being creative problem solving. And I always tell people I am half art teacher, half creative problem solving teacher. You know, there's this new art teaching philosophy that has emerged within the last 20 years that's called choice-based art education. So when we were growing up, art was a lot more like, okay, today we're painting a sunset. You're going to use these four colors. Nope, you didn't blend those well enough. You get a C. And
Yeah.
we have found that that is not helping anyone. It helps the kids who can listen well and not really anyone else. So what choice based does is you teach them, say, blending, and then you say paint whatever you want. As long as you can show me you can blend, you are good. And that puts the ball in their court, because suddenly they're not just blindly following orders, they are making decisions and trying to figure things out, and asking their friends what they need to do and asking you what to do, and they're thinking a lot more. And in this current state of education where we are teaching to the test to get these kids to pass the PSSAs or the Keystones, it is vital that they have these classes where they can make their own decisions and have some autonomy over their work. So I think it is just absolutely vital. And, I will advocate for that all day long.
I'm literally speechless for a number of reasons. I don't think I've ever heard it that well articulated. What was the phrase you used? A creative problem solver?
Creative problem solving. Yeah.
Jeez, that's brilliant. I gotta say, I love doing these things because you talk with artists and you realize how deeply they really do think about these things. It's not just throwing paint on a canvas. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I'm blushing, so thank you.
you kind of talked about this a little bit with like how you got started with watercolor, but is there any way that your background as an artist has influenced how you teach and kind of vice versa?
Yeah. That's a good question. I mean, I was a very artistic kid, and a lot of people picked up on that and allowed me a lot of freedom. If I wanted to take notes, drawing pictures, my teachers knew that I could do that. So I think the people who have taught me before granted me some grace in how I learned and how I created. And so I really try to do that for my students, and just let them be and make stuff. And if they want to make ugly art, go for it. Like maybe that ugly art is going to be the next Picasso. You never know what's going to happen. So I was lucky enough to have people who let me just do my own stuff. And so I think I'm trying to pay that forward and just let students be, make their own stuff.
Speaking of making own stuff, any mediums or art styles that you want to try but haven't really had time or the opportunity?
This is one of the sadder parts of my college careers. COVID-19 hit my junior year,
Oh,
and
gross.
I was in the middle of woodworking, which I loved because I had never done anything like it. I didn't know anything. I loved the process. I loved staining and cutting, and it just felt so good to be hands-on.
Yeah.
And our year was cut short, so we only got to do half the projects. And I was so bummed out because I retained so little of it. Um, that's one thing, woodworking. I've, in the past couple of weeks, just bought a big pack of saws, and I'm going to try to start incorporating some very basic woodworking into my puppetry just to give them a little bit more life. I do a lot of cardboard puppets, so give that 10 years and they're falling apart. So I figured if I can get some wooden armatures for some of these things, they might have a little bit longer of a shelf life. So that's the big thing that I'm trying to delve into.
A big pack of saws.
Big pack of saws.
All right, I got 3 more questions here. Here we go. Biggest artistic influences, past and or present.
So I have like an art school answer, which is I have always really resonated with Rene Magritte's work.
Yo, dude. How did I not see that?
Yeah,
Wow.
he is a big influence for me.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
I actually did a piece in woodworking, a different piece. I had this little Magritte statue. It was Son of Man with the apple in front of his face, and I built a reliquary, around it, and it had like one of his signature birds flying out of it. But yeah, his stuff has always felt so. It's melancholy. But it's so beautiful and it's present, and it really catches me. That's probably my like classical art educator answer. But I feel like the more truthful answer is I was so inspired by all of the extremely surreal cartoons that Cartoon Network was putting out when I was growing up, like Adventure Time.
Adventure Time, yeah.
Yep. What else? Flapjack, Chowder. I would just watch those shows and draw everything that I saw,
That's
and
awesome.
I feel like it really has seeped its way into my professional art as all of these very strange cartoons that I used to watch. So yeah, I'd say Magritte and Cartoon Network.
Yeah.
I have been desperately trying to get someone to write a children's book for me. Because I'm not a strong writer, but I just wanna draw the pictures. Like, someone give me a chance one of these days.
Brilliant. Any advice for someone in high school who wants to be an artist?
I got this piece of advice when I was in high school from my art teacher, Chris Irwin, who is one of the greatest people I've ever met in my life. But she told me, because I was having like a dry spell, I was like, I don't know what to draw. And she said, it doesn't matter what you draw. Sit down at the same time every night and force yourself. And just do it. And she told me to do that, and I started doing that. And suddenly I was a painting son of a gun. I was just constant, like I couldn't stop it. So my advice is the same. Find a time, whether right before bed, and just doodle. Make something, and it's going to flow out of you.
Can you talk about a piece of art you did that was pretty challenging, but in the end turned out awesome? And kind of what did you learn from that experience?
Yes, good question. My mind immediately goes to a puppet that I made. I had just finished the Percy Jackson puppets, and there was a community theater, the Mishler, was putting on Into the Woods, if you're familiar with that show.
Yeah.
So there's a cow in it, and the cow for 40 years since that play was written has always just been a cow statue until the last Broadway version of it. They decided to do a cow puppet, and everyone just fell in love with this puppet. Like it's beautiful. I saw it in person at the Broadway Museum. It's incredible. So anyway, I reached out, and I was not at all qualified, but I was like, I really want to take a stab at making the Milky White puppet. I will do it for free. I just want to do it. And so I started working on it, and I realized that I had no idea what I was doing. And it was, couldn't be cardboard. It had to be like an actual structure that could be puppeteered, and the mouth needed to move, and it needed to be wrapped in fabric, which I had never done before. So and this is not like me. I usually like to just mess around with stuff until it works, but I just started researching, and I started looking at videos online and looking up all of these mechanisms that I had no idea how to build. And the whole project took me probably 4 months in total, which is probably the longest I've worked on anything ever. But eventually I figured it out, and I'm so proud of this. But a random reviewer of the Mishler put in his review for the show how amazing he thought the puppet was. And he didn't know who the puppeteer was, but congrats to them for an amazing puppet. And it just like made my entire life. So that was a really cool payoff for that.
So I want to turn the time over to you. If there's anything you want to say, you could give words of wisdom. You could plug anything that you're doing or want people to see. You could also talk conspiracy theories or cryptozoology. Time's yours for as long as you want here, because that's about as much as I can pay.
Well, I do have a fun project coming up if you want to check it out, and I can get you the dates later.
Cool.
But it is SAMA, the Southern Allegheny Museum of Arts, is doing an event called Exotic Eats, and it is basically this day where they are bringing all these exotic foods, but they commissioned me to be the live entertainment, which is going to be 3 giant animal puppets, which I showed you those earlier. But there's going to be the giant giraffe puppet and a giant elephant puppet and a giant flamingo puppet, which I am finishing up currently in my classroom. So we're hiring some local actors to be the puppeteers and just sort of walk around and interact with all these people as they eat delicious exotic foods. So
that's amazing. Yeah, send me the dates. I'll push it out. We'll put it in the newsletter for the Fox Art Gallery's newsletter too.
that would be awesome. Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
That sounds so cool. Which SAMA?
It's the Bedford branch.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, man. I really appreciate this. And
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Canvas. Deep dives with inspiring artists. Brought to you by the most honest thing. Fine Art by John Cooper. I'm incredibly grateful for your continued support and hope you enjoyed today's insightful conversation. Stay tuned for our next captivating episode of Beyond the Canvas. In the meantime, be sure to explore my Substack at johncooperbardsubstack.com. Every Sunday, I share my museum mishaps, art opinions, and the passionate and flawless, and the highs and lows of my artistic journey. It's all part of the most honest thing. Fine Art, John Cooper.
she's, from what I can tell, the kind of person that understands the soul of students better than any of the other faculty there.
100%.
Yeah. And
She
really
actually-
tries to support them.
She actually gave me my favorite compliment I ever got in college, which I did this. What did I even do? It was like a bird. It was some
That's
sort of
hilarious.
bird, and she told me that it looked like it was such a joyful piece, and she said, "I can just tell that you were so joyful doing this." And I was like, "Oh, I was!" Like she understood the piece.